Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Alfonso Manning's key turned in the lock with a soft click. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. He stepped inside, the weight of his travel bag pulling at his shoulder. "Shannon," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. No answer. He glanced at his watch. Shannon wouldn't be home from work for another hour at least. Alfonso had wrapped up his security consultation job early, hoping to surprise his wife. Now, standing in the silent house, an inexplicable unease settled over him. He made his way upstairs, his footsteps heavy on the wooden steps. In their bedroom, he dropped his bag on the bed and began unpacking. His movements automatic after years of business trips. Suits went on hangers, dirty laundry in the hamper, toiletries back in the bathroom. As he hung up his last shirt in Shannon's closet, something caught his eye. A slight irregularity in the back panel, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. And Alfonso, with years of security work under his belt, was always looking. "What the hell?" he muttered, running his fingers along the edge. There was definitely something off about this panel. He pressed gently, feeling for any give. With a soft click, a hidden compartment popped open. Alfonso's brow furrowed as he reached in. His fingers closed around something plastic. He pulled out a stack of unlabeled DVDs. His heart began to race, a sense of foreboding washing over him. Why would Shannon have hidden DVDs? What could possibly be on them that she needed to keep secret? With trembling hands, he grabbed one of the discs and headed to the living room. The DVD player whirred to life, and Alfonso sank onto the couch, remote in hand. The screen flickered, and his world shattered. There was Shannon, his wife of 5 years, laughing and holding hands with William Caldwell, their next-door neighbor and a prominent city councilman. The date stamp in the corner showed this was from just 2 weeks ago, when Alfonso had been on another business trip. "No, no, no, no," Alfonso whispered, his voice cracking. This couldn't be happening. There had to be some explanation. He changed the disc, desperate for context, for anything that would make sense of what he was seeing. But each new video only deepened the betrayal. Shannon with Gordon Avery, her boss and CEO of a major tech company. Shannon with Terrence Navarro, her own cousin, and a well-known philanthropist. Alfonso's mind reeled. How long had this been going on? How many others were there? And why in God's name had Shannon recorded it all? As he watched, numb with shock, a recurring theme began to emerge. In each video, Shannon mentioned a special group she wanted her partners to join. "You'd be perfect for our little club," Shannon purred to William in one clip, her hand resting on his thigh. "We could use someone with your connections." "I don't know," William replied, looking nervous. Shannon laughed, the sound sending chills down Alfonso's spine. It wasn't her usual laugh. This was calculated, almost predatory. "Oh, darling, it's only as complicated as you make it. Think of the possibilities." Alfonso's security training kicked in, overriding his emotional turmoil. This wasn't just betrayal. The way Shannon manipulated each man, the careful way she broached the topic of this group, it all reeked of a calculated scheme. He rewound the videos, watching them again with a critical eye. In one, Shannon was with Gordon Avery in what looked like a high-end hotel room. "Gordon, sweetie," Shannon said, "you know how much the group could benefit from your expertise. Think of the doors you could open for us." Gordon looked uncertain. "I don't know. Shannon, my position is delicate. If anyone found out..." Shannon cut him off with a kiss. "No one will find out. We protect our own. Isn't that worth something?" Alfonso's stomach churned. He fast-forwarded through scenes of intimacy, focusing on the conversations. With Terrence, Shannon took a different approach. "Terrence, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Think of all the good we could do with your connections, the charity work alone." Terrence seemed more eager than the others. "You really think I could make a difference?" Shannon's smile was triumphant. "Oh, absolutely. We're going to change the world, one person at a time." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, Alfonso sat in stunned silence. The woman on these videos, she wasn't the Shannon he knew or thought he knew. This Shannon was manipulative, cunning, and deeply involved in something that set off every alarm bell in Alfonso's head. He glanced at his watch again. Shannon would be home soon. He needed to act normal, to pretend he hadn't just had his entire world turned upside down. But more than that, he needed help. This was bigger than just his marriage. Whatever Shannon was involved in, it was dangerous. Alfonso made a decision. He carefully returned the DVDs to their hiding place, making sure everything looked undisturbed. Then he picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts. He needed someone he could trust, someone with the skills to dig deeper into this special group. His finger hovered over a name. Sylvia Rodriguez, a former colleague who'd left the security world to become a private investigator. If anyone could help him unravel this mystery, it was her. Taking a deep breath, Alfonso pressed call. The next morning, Alfonso sat at his desk at Elite Guard Solutions, staring blankly at his computer screen. The words blurred before his eyes, his mind still reeling from yesterday's discovery. He'd barely slept, lying awake next to Shannon, hyper-aware of every move she made, every breath she took. How could she sleep so peacefully while their entire life together was a lie? "Manning, you all right?" His colleague, Jake, peered at him from across the room. "You look like hell, man." Alfonso forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as fake as it felt. "Just a rough night. I'm fine." As soon as Jake turned away, Alfonso pulled out his phone. His conversation with Sylvia last night had been brief. She'd agreed to meet him today. His fingers hovered over her name for a moment before he pressed call. His heart pounding. "Sylvia Rodriguez speaking," came the crisp voice on the other end. "Sylvia, it's Alfonso. We still on for lunch?" There was a pause. "Of course. The cafe we discussed in an hour." Alfonso glanced at his watch. "I'll be there." An hour later, they sat in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe. Alfonso's coffee went cold as he recounted his discovery to Sylvia, whose face remained impassive throughout. "And in every video, she keeps mentioning this special group." Alfonso finished, his voice low. "Sylvia, I've never seen Shannon like this. The way she was manipulating these men, it was like watching a stranger." Sylvia leaned back, her eyes sharp. "So you want me to dig into this special group Shannon's involved with?" Alfonso nodded. "I need to know what I'm dealing with here, Sylvia. This feels bigger than just affairs. The way she was talking about connections, about changing the world. I'm worried she's gotten involved in something dangerous." Alfonso nodded. "I need to know what I'm dealing with here, Sylvia. This feels bigger than just affairs. The way she was talking about connections, about changing the world. I'm worried she's gotten involved in something dangerous." Sylvia's expression softened slightly. "I'll do what I can, Alfonso, but you need to prepare yourself. Whatever I find, it might not be pretty." "I know," Alfonso said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I need to know the truth, no matter how ugly it is." Sylvia reached across the table, squeezing his hand briefly. "I'll start digging. In the meantime, you need to act normal. If Shannon suspects you know anything, it could make things a lot more complicated." Alfonso nodded, feeling a weight settle on his shoulders. "How long do you think it'll take?" "Hard to say," Sylvia replied. "If this group is as sophisticated as it sounds, they'll have covered their tracks well. Give me a few weeks. I'll contact you if I find anything significant." As they parted ways, Alfonso felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that he wasn't facing this alone anymore, and dread at what Sylvia might uncover. Over the next few weeks, Alfonso lived in a state of constant tension. At home, he forced himself to act normal around Shannon. His skin crawled every time she touched him, kissed him, told him she loved him. He found himself analyzing her every word, every gesture, looking for signs of the manipulative woman he'd seen in those videos. "You're quiet tonight," Shannon said one evening, curling up next to him on the couch. Everything okay at work? Alfonso plastered on a smile. Just tired. Big project coming up. Shannon frowned, concern in her eyes. You're working too hard, honey. Maybe we should take a vacation soon. Just the two of us. The thought made Alfonso's stomach turn. Maybe, he said noncommittally. Let's see how this project goes first. At work, he struggled to focus, jumping every time his phone buzzed with a potential update from Sylvia. His colleagues noticed the change in him. Manning, are you sure you're okay? Jake asked one day, genuine concern in his voice. You've been off for weeks now. Alfonso sighed, rubbing his eyes. Just some personal stuff. I'll be fine. Jake looked like he wanted to say more. But just then, Alfonso's phone buzzed. A text from Sylvia. We need to talk. Same cafe. 1 hour. Alfonso's heart raced. This was it. Sorry, Jake, he said, standing up abruptly. I got to go. Family emergency. An hour later, he sat across from Sylvia, his hands clenched around a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. It's worse than we thought, Alfonso, she said without preamble as soon as he sat down. Her face was grim, her usual professional detachment cracking slightly. This special group, it's a sophisticated cult-like organization. They target influential and wealthy individuals for marriage and partnerships. Alfonso felt the blood drain from his face. What's their end game? Sylvia's voice was low, her eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. Blackmail, primarily. They use these relationships to force their targets into joining or financing their operations. But that's not all. She paused, meeting Alfonso's eyes. They're involved in large-scale money laundering, identity theft, even human trafficking. And they've got their hooks deep into city government and law enforcement. Alfonso's mind raced, piecing together the implications. The influential men in the videos, a city councilman, a CEO, a prominent philanthropist. All perfect targets. So Shannon is a key player. Sylvia finished. I'm sorry, Alfonso, but your wife is at the heart of this organization. From what I've been able to uncover, she's one of their top recruiters. Alfonso felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He'd known it was bad. But this was beyond anything he'd imagined. How long has this been going on? Sylvia shook her head. It's hard to say for certain. This group is good at covering their tracks. But from what I've pieced together, Shannon's been involved for at least 3 years. 3 years. Half our marriage. Alfonso's world tilted on its axis. What do I do now, Sylvia? I can't just go home and pretend everything's normal without knowing this. Sylvia leaned forward, her voice urgent. You have to, Alfonso, at least for a little while longer. This organization is dangerous. If they suspect you know anything, your life could be in danger. She paused, considering. There's a charity gala coming up next month. A lot of the city's elite will be there, including several people I've identified as likely members of this group. If we're going to expose them, that might be our best chance. Alfonso nodded slowly, his mind already working on a plan. I'll need your help, Sylvia. We'll only get one shot at this. You've got it, Sylvia replied without hesitation. Whatever you need. As they parted ways, Alfonso felt a strange mix of emotions. Horror at what he'd learned. Fear for what lay ahead. But also a grim determination. He dedicated his life to protecting people. Now he had the chance to take down an organization that had hurt countless individuals, including himself. He squared his shoulders as he walked back to his office. It was time to start planning. The weeks leading up to the charity gala were a blur of careful planning and sleepless nights for Alfonso. Every moment at home felt like a performance. Each interaction with Shannon, a dangerous dance where one misstep could give everything away. Are you excited about the gala? Shannon asked one evening as they got ready for bed. Her voice was light, but Alfonso caught the calculating look in her eyes. He forced a smile. Of course, it's always a good time. Shannon's answering smile sent chills down his spine. Oh, absolutely. I have a feeling this year's event will be memorable. If only she knew. Finally, the night of the gala arrived. Alfonso stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his bow tie. The invitation lay on the dresser, a gilded reminder of the night ahead. Shannon emerged from the bathroom, resplendent in a shimmering gown that hugged her curves. "You look handsome," she smiled, kissing his cheek. Alfonso fought the urge to recoil, to wipe away the touch of her lips. "Thanks," he managed, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "You look beautiful." As they drove to the gala, Alfonso's mind raced. Everything was in place. Weeks of careful planning, of late-night meetings with Sylvia, of calling in favors and making discreet inquiries would come to fruition tonight. The ballroom was a sea of glittering dresses and crisp tuxedos. Alfonso scanned the crowd, recognizing faces from Shannon's videos. William Caldwell holding court near the bar, his wife oblivious at his side. Gordon Avery laughing with a group of executives, his hand possessively on the small of his assistant's back. Terence Navarro charming a cluster of socialites, his eyes constantly darting to Shannon. "I'm going to mingle," Shannon whispered, squeezing his arm before disappearing into the crowd. Alfonso watched her go, noting how she immediately gravitated towards a group of men he didn't recognize. More potential recruits, no doubt. Taking a deep breath, Alfonso made his way to the audiovisual control room. He flashed a fake ID to the young technician at the door. "Last-minute changes to the presentation," he explained smoothly. The technician nodded, stepping aside without question. Once inside, Alfonso worked quickly, inserting a flash drive and uploading his carefully edited video. His heart pounded as he set the timer. In just 15 minutes, everything would change. Returning to the ballroom, he grabbed a champagne flute, forcing himself to make small talk as the minutes ticked by. He caught sight of Shannon across the room, her head bent close to William Caldwell's as they spoke in hushed tones. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. Conversation stuttered to a halt as all eyes turned to the large screen at the front of the room. Alfonso's palms were sweating as the video began to play. Gasps echoed through the room as Shannon appeared on screen, in compromising situations with William, Gordon, and Terence. The footage was carefully cut to hint at the cult's illegal activities without revealing the full extent of Alfonso's knowledge. "What the hell is this?" William Caldwell's voice cut through the shocked silence. He knocked over a waiter in his haste to leave, champagne spilling across the marble floor. Gordon Avery turned an alarming shade of red, loosening his collar as he stammered excuses to the people around him. "This is clearly some kind of sick joke." Terence Navarro simply stood, mouth agape, as his wife screamed at him. "How could you? With your own cousin?" Chaos erupted. People were shouting, demanding explanations. Some were frantically making phone calls, while others rushed for the exits. In the midst of the pandemonium, Alfonso calmly approached Shannon. Her face was a mask of shock and fury as she whirled to face him. "How dare you?" she began, her voice shaking with rage. Alfonso cut her off, his voice cold. "Save it, Shannon." He pulled out an envelope from his jacket. "Divorce papers. I suggest you read them carefully." Shannon's eyes widened as she realized the full implications of what was happening. "Alfonso, you don't understand," she said, her voice taking on the honeyed tone he'd heard her use in the videos. "This isn't what it looks like. If you'll just let me explain." Alfonso held up a hand, cutting her off. "I understand perfectly, Shannon. I've seen the videos. All of them." Shannon's face paled, the mask of charm slipping for a moment. "You went through my things," she hissed, anger flashing in her eyes. "I found them by accident," Alfonso replied, his voice steady. "But that's not important now. What matters is that I know about your special group. I know what you've been doing, who you've been manipulating." Shannon's eyes darted around the room, taking in the chaos unfolding around them. William Caldwell was being confronted by his wife, while Gordon Avery was frantically tapping at his phone, likely calling his lawyer. Terence Navarro had disappeared entirely. "You have no idea what you've done," Shannon said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is bigger than you could possibly understand." Alfonso stood his ground. "I understand enough. It's over, Shannon. For you. For this organization. For all of it." Just then, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Several police officers were entering the ballroom, led by a woman Alfonso recognized as the chief of police. Shannon's face twisted into a sneer. "You think this will stop us? You have no idea how deep this goes, Alfonso. We have people everywhere." "Maybe," Alfonso conceded, "but after tonight, everyone will be watching. Your secrets are out in the open now." He turned to walk away, but Shannon grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Don't you walk away from me," she snarled. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Alfonso gently, but firmly removed her hand. "I think I have a pretty good idea now," he said softly. "Goodbye, Shannon." As he walked away, leaving Shannon standing alone in the middle of the unraveling chaos she had helped create, Alfonso felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The facade had crumbled. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time in weeks, he felt hope. He made his way through the crowded ballroom, nodding to Sylvia, who was discreetly observing from a corner. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of a job well done. Outside, the cool night air hit Alfonso's face, and he took a deep breath. The sounds of sirens approaching in the distance mixed with the muffled chaos still emanating from the ballroom behind him. As he loosened his bow tie, Alfonso allowed himself a small smile. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But tonight, they had struck a significant blow against a dangerous organization. And for now, that was enough. He hailed a taxi, ready to head home and prepare for whatever challenges the coming days would bring. As the car pulled away from the curb, Alfonso watched the glittering lights of the gala venue recede in the rearview mirror, symbolically leaving behind the life he had known and stepping into an uncertain but potentially brighter future. The morning after the charity gala, Alfonso Manning woke to a cacophony of ringing phones and buzzing notifications. His head throbbed, a reminder of the stress and adrenaline from the night before. He squinted at his phone's bright screen, seeing a flood of missed calls and messages. The events of last night came rushing back, and a mixture of relief and dread settled in his stomach. A text from Sylvia Rodriguez caught his eye. "Turn on the news." Now, Alfonso fumbled for the remote and flicked on the television. The anchor woman's voice filled the room, her tone grave. "Breaking news this morning. Several high-profile arrests have been made following last night's charity gala scandal. Among those taken into custody is Shannon Manning, wife of security consultant Alfonso Manning." Alfonso watched, a surreal feeling washing over him as footage from last night played across the screen. Clips of Shannon being led away in handcuffs, William Caldwell trying to shield his face from reporters, Gordon Avery being escorted out of his office building. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Detective Sarah Chen. "Mr. Manning, we need to talk. Can you come to the station?" Within an hour, Alfonso found himself sitting across from Detective Chen in a small windowless room at the police station. The detective's dark eyes scrutinized him over a steaming cup of coffee. "Mr. Manning," she began, her voice cool and professional. "I understand you have information about this organization your wife was involved with." Alfonso nodded, leaning forward. "More than information, Detective. I have evidence, videos, recorded conversations, financial records that Sylvia Rodriguez helped me obtain." Detective Chen's eyebrow arched slightly at the mention of Sylvia's name. "Start from the beginning, Mr. Manning, and don't leave anything out." For the next several hours, Alfonso recounted everything. From finding the hidden DVDs to his collaboration with Sylvia, to the carefully orchestrated exposure at the gala. Detective Chen listened intently, occasionally interrupting to ask for clarification or more details. As Alfonso finished his account, Detective Chen sat back, tapping her pen against her legal pad. "Mr. Manning, I'm going to be frank with you. What you've uncovered, it's big. Bigger than you probably realize. This organization has tentacles reaching into every level of our city's infrastructure. Alfonso felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean for the investigation? Detective Chen's lips thinned into a grim line. It means we have to tread very carefully. There are people involved in this who have the power to make evidence disappear, to discredit witnesses, to shut down entire investigations. So what do we do? Alfonso asked, frustration creeping into his voice. We build an airtight case, Detective Chen replied. And we do it quietly. I'm putting together a task force of officers I trust implicitly. We'll need your continued cooperation, Mr. Manning. Are you prepared for that? Alfonso nodded without hesitation. Whatever it takes, Detective, I want to see this through to the end. Over the next few weeks, Alfonso found himself in a whirlwind of legal proceedings, interviews with prosecutors, and clandestine meetings with Detective Chen's task force. He watched as the case against Shannon and the other arrested cult members began to take shape. But even as progress was made, Alfonso could sense the pushback. One afternoon, he sat in on a witness interview that went sideways. I'm sorry, the witness, a former employee of Gordon Avery, said nervously. I think I may have been mistaken in my earlier statement. My memory of events isn't as clear as I thought. Detective Chen's face remained impassive, but Alfonso could see the frustration in her eyes. As soon as the witness left, she turned to him. This is the third witness this week to suddenly develop amnesia. They're getting to people, Alfonso. We need to move faster. The stress began to take its toll on Alfonso. Nightmares plagued his sleep, filled with shadowy figures and Shannon's accusing eyes. During the day, he found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, jumping at every unexpected sound. At Sylvia's insistence, he started seeing a therapist, Dr. Ramirez. It's normal to feel overwhelmed, Alfonso, Dr. Ramirez said during one of their sessions. You've been through a traumatic experience, and the danger isn't over yet. But remember, you're not alone in this. Alfonso nodded. I know. It's just, I keep thinking about Shannon. How could I have been so blind? How did I not see what was happening right under my nose? Dr. Ramirez leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Alfonso, master manipulators like Shannon and this organization, they're experts at hiding their true nature. You can't blame yourself for their actions. Taking her words to heart, Alfonso made a conscious effort to strengthen his relationships with trusted friends and colleagues. He found solace in their support, drawing strength from their unwavering belief in him. One evening, as he was having dinner with Sylvia and a few close friends, his phone buzzed with a message from Detective Chen. We've got a problem. Meet me at the usual place in an hour. Alfonso felt his stomach drop. He made his excuses and left, his mind racing with possibilities. What new obstacle were they facing now? Months passed, and the legal battles raged on. Alfonso had settled into a new routine, dividing his time between his work at Elite Guard Solutions and assisting with the ongoing investigation. But the constant pressure was wearing on him. One evening, as Alfonso was leaving work late, he noticed something off about his car. The security system light was blinking irregularly. Years of training had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, they were screaming that something was wrong. As he approached his vehicle cautiously, a man stepped out of the shadows. Mr. Manning, the stranger said, his voice devoid of emotion. I have a message for you. Alfonso tensed, ready for a confrontation. Who are you? What do you want? The man held out an envelope. An invitation, Mr. Manning. My employers would like to have a word with you. I suggest you accept. Alfonso's mind raced. This had to be the cult. But why now? Why like this? And if I refuse, he asked, already suspecting the answer. The man's expression didn't change. That would be unwise. There's a car waiting. I suggest you get in. Refusing or contacting the police will have dire consequences. Alfonso weighed his options quickly. Running or calling for help seemed futile, and potentially dangerous. The smartest move was to play along, to see where this led. As he followed the man to a waiting car, Alfonso discreetly activated the burner phone hidden in a secret pocket of his jacket, a precaution Sylvia had insisted on weeks earlier. He sent out a prearranged distress signal, hoping Sylvia would understand its significance. The car ride was long and winding. Alfonso tried to keep track of their route, but after a series of seemingly random turns, he found himself thoroughly disoriented. The man who had delivered the invitation sat beside him, silent and still as a statue. "Where are we going?" Alfonso asked, breaking the tense silence. The man didn't even turn his head. "You'll see soon enough, Mr. Manning. Patience is a virtue." Alfonso fought the urge to laugh hysterically. Patience, when I was being taken by a dangerous group. But he kept his composure, his mind working furiously to prepare for whatever lay ahead. After what felt like hours, the car came to a stop. Alfonso peered out the window, taking in their destination with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Before them stood the Starlight Hotel, a once grand building now fallen into disrepair. Its windows were boarded up, and the faded sign hung crookedly above the entrance. "Charming place," Alfonso muttered as he was led out of the car. The man ignored his comment, guiding him through the dilapidated lobby and up a creaking staircase. The musty smell of neglect filled his nostrils as they made their way down a dimly lit corridor. Finally, they stopped in front of a set of double doors. The man knocked twice, then stepped aside as the doors swung open. Alfonso found himself in what must have once been the hotel's ballroom. A long table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs. At the head of the table sat a man Alfonso had only seen in photographs and surveillance footage, Sammy Watkins, the charismatic and ruthless leader of the cult. "Mr. Manning," Watkins said, his voice smooth as silk. "We meet at last. Please have a seat." Alfonso remained standing, his eyes scanning the room. He recognized several faces from the charity gala, men and women who had managed to evade arrest. "I'll stand, thanks," Alfonso replied, keeping his voice steady. "What's this about, Watkins?" Watkins' smile never wavered. "Straight to business. I see. Very well." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "You've caused us quite a bit of trouble, Mr. Manning, but I'm a reasonable man. I believe we can come to an arrangement." "An arrangement?" Alfonso echoed, his tone skeptical. "Yes," Watkins nodded. "This investigation of yours is becoming quite inconvenient. We want you to use your influence to halt it. And of course, we'll need you to assist in Shannon's release." Alfonso felt a surge of anger. "You can't be serious." Watkins' eyes hardened. "Oh, I assure you, Mr. Manning, I'm quite serious. You have more influence than you realize. A word from you expressing doubt about the evidence, suggesting that perhaps things aren't as clear-cut as they seemed. It could go a long way." "And why would I do that?" Alfonso asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because, Mr. Manning," Watkins replied, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "If you don't, there will be consequences. Your career, your safety, the lives of your loved ones. All of it hangs in the balance." Alfonso's mind raced. He needed time to figure out a way out of this. "I need to think about this," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Watkins nodded, as if he had expected this response. "Of course, we're not unreasonable. Take some time to consider your options. We'll give you a moment to collect your thoughts." With a wave of his hand, Watkins dismissed the others from the room. As they filed out, Alfonso was left alone. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. He paced the room, his mind working furiously. He knew he couldn't give in to their demands, but outright refusal would likely get him killed. He needed a plan. As he moved around the room, Alfonso's security training kicked in. He noted potential escape routes, items that could be used as weapons. And then he saw it. A small air vent near the floor, partially hidden behind a heavy curtain, moving as quietly as he could. Alfonso made his way to the vent. It was small, but he thought he might be able to squeeze through. Using a pin from his pocket, he began working on the screws holding the vent cover in place. "Come on, come on," he muttered under his breath as he worked on the stubborn screws. Just as he managed to loosen the last screw, he heard footsteps approaching. Quickly, he moved away from the vent, his mind racing. He had a way out now, but leaving might mean losing the opportunity to gather crucial evidence against the cult. As the footsteps grew closer, Alfonso made his decision. He would stay for now. He had a chance to gather information that could be vital to bringing down the cult once and for all. It was a risk, but one he was willing to take. The door handle turned, and Alfonso steeled himself for what was to come. Whatever happened next, he was determined to see this through to the end. He took a deep breath, centering himself. Years of security work had prepared him for high-stress situations, but this was on another level entirely. Alfonso Manning stood in the dimly lit room of the abandoned Starlight Hotel, his mind racing. He had freed himself from his restraints, but the real challenge lay ahead. The air was thick with dust and tension. Every creak of the old building set his nerves on edge. He pressed his ear against the door, straining to hear any movement outside. Nothing. The cult members had left him alone, probably to let the weight of their threats sink in. Little did they know, Alfonso had no intention of giving in. As he contemplated his next move, a faint sound caught his attention. At first, he thought it was just the old hotel settling. But then he heard it again. Voices. Muffled shouts. The unmistakable sound of running feet. Alfonso's heart rate spiked. Had Sylvia received his distress signal? Was help on the way? Or was this something else entirely? He didn't have long to wonder. Suddenly, the relative quiet of the hotel was shattered by the sound of splintering wood and shouted commands. NYPD. Freeze. The cult members, caught off guard, began to retaliate. The crack of gunfire echoed through the corridors, and Alfonso instinctively dropped to the floor. His security training kicked in. Outside his room, chaos reigned. He could hear the sounds of struggle, of bodies hitting walls, of orders being barked and ignored. Alfonso knew he had to act fast. He scanned the room once more, his eyes landing on a heavy brass lamp. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He grabbed it, hefting its weight in his hand as he approached the door. Taking a deep breath, Alfonso turned the handle. The door swung open to reveal a scene of utter mayhem. Cult members and police officers were engaged in hand-to-hand combat up and down the corridor. The air was thick with gunpowder and tension. Alfonso barely had time to take it all in before a cult member noticed him in charge. Without hesitation, Alfonso swung the lamp, catching the man square in the jaw. He went down hard, and Alfonso quickly relieved him of his weapon. Now armed, Alfonso moved swiftly down the corridor, his eyes scanning for familiar faces. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Sylvia Rodriguez. "Alfonso," she exclaimed, her face a mixture of relief and determination. "Thank God you're all right. We need to move now." "Sylvia, how did you?" She cut him off with a wave of her hand. "No time. Watkins is trying to escape. He's got a briefcase full of documents. Could be everything we need to bring this whole operation down." Alfonso nodded, his jaw set. "Where?" "Last seen heading for the roof." "Come on." They raced through the hotel, dodging debris and ducking under the swing of a cult member's fist. Alfonso's world narrowed to a pinpoint focus. Find Watkins, secure the documents, end this once and for all. As they climbed the stairs to the roof, Alfonso caught a glimpse of a figure disappearing through a door. "There," he shouted to Sylvia. "I'm going after him. Cover me." Without waiting for a response, Alfonso burst through the door onto the roof. The cool night air hit him like a slap, a stark contrast to the stuffy interior of the hotel. And there, silhouetted against the city skyline, was Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins stood at the edge of the roof, his expensive suit rumpled. His usually perfectly coiffed hair was in disarray. In one hand, he clutched a briefcase. In the other, a gun. "It's over, Watkins," Alfonso called out, his own weapon trained on the cult leader. "There's nowhere left to run." Watkins turned his face a mask of contempt. "Oh, Mr. Manning, always the Boy Scout, aren't you? You have no idea what you're dealing with." "I think I have a pretty good idea," Alfonso replied, taking a cautious step forward. "Money laundering, identity theft, human trafficking. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?" Watkins' laugh was hollow. "You think you've won? This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. You can't stop what's coming." "Maybe not," Alfonso conceded, "but I can stop you." What happened next was a blur of motion. Watkins raised his gun, but Alfonso was faster. He tackled the cult leader, sending them both sprawling across the rooftop. The briefcase skittered away, teetering dangerously close to the edge. They grappled, each man fighting for control. Watkins was stronger than he looked, his desperation lending him strength. He landed a solid punch to Alfonso's jaw, momentarily stunning him. Watkins scrambled to his feet, lunging for the briefcase. Alfonso, shaking off the blow, launched himself forward, catching Watkins around the ankles. They both went down hard, rolling perilously close to the roof's edge. The gun had been lost in the scuffle, but that didn't stop Watkins. He fought like a cornered animal, all pretense of civility gone. His elbow caught Alfonso in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. For a moment, Alfonso faltered. Watkins seized the opportunity, shoving hard. Alfonso felt himself sliding, the rough concrete of the roof scraping against his back. And then suddenly, there was nothing beneath him but air. Time seemed to slow. Alfonso could see the street far below, could hear Sylvia's shout of alarm. His hand shot out, grasping desperately for anything to stop his fall. His fingers caught the edge of the roof, and he hung there, suspended between life and death. Watkins' face appeared above him, a mixture of triumph and madness in his eyes. "Goodbye, Mr. Manning," he sneered, raising his foot to stamp on Alfonso's fingers. But Alfonso wasn't done yet. With a surge of adrenaline, he swung his other hand up, catching Watkins by the ankle. The cult leader's eyes widened in shock as he lost his balance, tipping forward over the edge of the roof. In that moment, Alfonso had a choice. He could let Watkins fall, ending the threat once and for all. It would be so easy. Just let go. But that wasn't who Alfonso was. With a grunt of effort, he tightened his grip on Watkins' ankle, even as his other hand began to slip from the roof's edge. "Sylvia," he shouted. "A little help here." Sylvia appeared at the edge of the roof, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Without hesitation, she grabbed Alfonso's arm, bracing herself against the roof's edge. Together, they hauled both Alfonso and Watkins back onto solid ground. Watkins collapsed, the fight gone out of him. Alfonso, breathing heavily, secured the cult leader's hands behind his back with his own tie. You saved me," Watkins panted, disbelief evident in his voice. "Why?" Alfonso met his gaze steadily. "Because that's what the good guys do. Watkins, we're better than you. And now you're going to face justice for everything you've done." As if on cue, the roof door burst open. Detective Chen and her team poured out, weapons at the ready. They quickly took control of the situation, securing Watkins and retrieving the briefcase. Detective Chen approached Alfonso, a rare smile on her face. "Good work, Manning. We got them. All of them." Alfonso nodded, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving him feeling drained. "The documents?" "Safe," Chen confirmed. "And from what we've seen so far, it's everything we need to bring this whole organization down." As the police led Watkins away, Alfonso felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Sylvia standing there, concern etched on her face. "You okay?" she asked softly. Alfonso took a deep breath, looking out over the city skyline. The first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think I am." The weeks following the takedown of the cult were a whirlwind of activity. Alfonso found himself at the center of a storm of legal proceedings, debriefings, and media attention. The documents recovered from Watkins had indeed proven to be a treasure trove of information, exposing the full extent of the cult's influence. Alfonso sat in Detective Chen's office, watching as she pinned yet another photo to the evidence board. The faces of corrupt officials, business leaders, and even fellow law enforcement officers stared back at him. "It's staggering," Chen said, stepping back to survey the board. "We're looking at the biggest corruption scandal this city has ever seen." Alfonso nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and weariness. "How many arrests so far?" 73 as of this morning," Chen replied. "And we're not done yet. Every day, we're uncovering new connections, new crimes." As they discussed the ongoing investigation, Alfonso couldn't help but think of Shannon. His ex-wife was facing a laundry list of charges, her trial set to begin in a few months. The woman he had loved, the life they had shared, it all seemed like a distant dream now. Chen seemed to read his thoughts. "You did the right thing, Manning. Never doubt that." Alfonso managed a small smile. "I know. It's a lot to process." As he left the police station, Alfonso was accosted by a group of reporters. Their questions came rapid fire. A barrage of inquiries about the cult, about Shannon, about his role in bringing it all down. "Mr. Manning, how does it feel to be hailed as a hero? What can you tell us about the ongoing investigation? Is it true that your ex-wife was a key player in the cult's operations?" Alfonso held up his hands, trying to fend off the onslaught. "No comment. Please, I just want to go home." He pushed through the crowd, escaping to the relative safety of his car. As he drove home, Alfonso couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The cult might be dismantled, but its effects lingered. At home, Alfonso poured himself a drink and sank into his armchair. The house felt empty, echoing with memories of a life that no longer existed. His phone buzzed, another message from a talk show wanting an exclusive interview. Alfonso ignored it. He had given one interview, a single powerful statement about the dangers of such organizations and the importance of trust and integrity. That was enough. He had no desire to relive the ordeal over and over for the entertainment of others. Instead, he pulled out a notepad and began to write. Ideas flowed onto the paper, plans for a new consulting firm, specializing in personal and corporate security. He could use his experience to help others protect themselves from similar threats. As he worked, Alfonso felt a sense of purpose settling over him. The ordeal had left him wiser, more cautious, but also more appreciative of genuine relationships and his own resilience. Weeks turned into months. Alfonso's consulting firm, Phoenix Security, began to take shape. He hired carefully, building a team he could trust implicitly. Among his first employees was Sylvia Rodriguez, whose investigative skills had proven invaluable. One evening, as they were closing up the office, Sylvia paused at Alfonso's desk. "You know, when you first came to me with this case, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Alfonso leaned back in his chair, a wry smile on his face. "You and me both. Sometimes I still can't believe it's over." Sylvia perched on the edge of his desk. "Is it though? Over, I mean." Alfonso considered her question. "The cult is finished. But the work? Helping people protect themselves, exposing corruption wherever we find it, that's never over." Sylvia nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well then, boss, what's our next move?" Before Alfonso could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Detective Chen. "New case. Might be up your alley. Drinks later to discuss." Alfonso showed the message to Sylvia, his eyebrow raised in a silent question. She grinned in response. "I'll grab my coat." As they left the office, Alfonso felt a surge of anticipation. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities. He had survived betrayal, faced down a dangerous cult, and come out the other side stronger for it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Alfonso Manning was ready to face them head-on. The story concludes with Alfonso hosting a small gathering at his new office. Sylvia is there, along with Detective Chen and a few other close friends who had supported him through the ordeal. As they raise their glasses in a toast, Alfonso looks around the room, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. "To new beginnings," he says, his voice steady and sure. The others echo his toast, their faces reflecting the same mix of determination and hope that Alfonso feels. As the conversation flows around him, Alfonso takes a moment to reflect on the journey that brought him here, from betrayal to justice, and finally, to peace. The road ahead might be uncertain, but Alfonso Manning was no longer afraid. He had found his purpose, his tribe, and himself. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.